All right, so next I'd like to welcome Brian Wyville, who will introduce our service awardee this year.
Hello, I'm Brian Wyville. I'm the chair of the CHCCS Awards Committee, and it's my pleasure to introduce Kelly Booth, who's our Service Award winner for 2020. Uh, Kelly is very well known to most of the senior researchers in Canada, and he is past president of CHCCS, and he's been a mover and shaker in the Canadian graphics and HCI communities actually since 1981. So, as well as being a significant researcher in our community, Kelly has been a prime mover in promoting graphics interface, which has become known as very high quality conference. And it's also the longest running conference in the field, predating when graphics and HCI actually became separate disciplines. Kelly actually also introduced the awards program and went on to make several new awards, making the program what it is today. The first person to be presented was Marceli Wine in 1990. An interesting year, 1990, because Kelly led the Canadian SIGGRAPH Bowl team that year to victory. He actually answered a question correctly, which was the key question deciding on our victory, taking a particular quote from a SIGGRAPH paper and recognizing it as being from a Frank Crowe paper. Frank Crowe actually was on the opposing team, and he failed to answer that question. So we were all very impressed with Kelly's deep knowledge of the subject. He has been a moving force in many other projects, particularly the Grand NCE, which helped keep grant money flowing to Canadian researchers for many years and was a very significant achievement. So please welcome CHCCS 2020 Service Award winner, Kelly Booth.
So it's my honor to accept the 2020 Service Award from the Canadian Human-Computer Communication Society. I'd like to thank the awards committee, the nominators, and everyone else who had a part in this. But I'd also like to recognize and thank all the people who came before me. As Brian has already said, the first conference was in 1969, and that was way before any of the fields that we're seeing now were really formed. They were just part of what was going on in computer science, computer engineering. And I think there was a lot of vision on the part of the people who did that. And I'd also like to thank the people that over my career I worked with, because as everyone knows, you never do anything on your own. In fact, you do nothing on your own, just about. Brian mentioned senior researchers. I am reminded of a colleague who once says there is a difference between becoming a senior researcher and just getting old. So I think I've definitely accomplished the getting old part. And I'd also like to thank not only the current leadership, but the future leadership of this organization, because that is where the success has always been, that we've been able to bring new people in to help run the conference. And I think that's what's kept it vibrant. So my own involvement started in 1980 when I was asked to be local arrangements chair for the Canadian Man-Computer Communication Society conference in 81. It wasn't until a bit later that the M changed to an H for computer-human communication. Took a little longer than maybe it should have, but it did change. There were a number of other changes in the conference. The very next year in 82, Bill Buxton and Ron Becker, who'd been involved for a while in the conference, decided to launch what was apparently was supposed to be a one-off conference called Graphics Interface, notice the name, in Toronto. And that was actually not in a regular conference year, which had been every odd year. And that was very successful. And based on that, the organization, we decided to change the name of the conference from CMCCS conference to Graphics Interface, because it really captured the notion that it was computer graphics and HCI and all the connections between them. And it also switched the conference to an annual conference. And so it's been every year since then. And those decisions, I think, were really good. There was then, as I mentioned, the later decision to change the name of the organization to more accurately reflect that it was computer-human communication that we were talking about, not male-dominated. Change has been really important for the conference and I think for the organization. 1986, Graphics Interface for the first time was held at UBC in Vancouver with the Vision Conference. So Kippers, which was another society that looks at, image processing and pattern recognition is what the name says. They had a computer vision conference and it was decided to hold that jointly. It took another 6 years before we did a joint conference again. That was in 1992, and that was again at UBC in Vancouver, and I was one of the general co-chairs for that. And that was actually a triple conference. That was AI, GI, VI. So the Canadian CHCCS organization and their AI conference, Graphics Interface, and then the Vision people calling their stream was called Vision Interface. We didn't regularly have a triple conference for a couple of years, but then for many years we did. And I just wanted to sort of editorialize a little bit that I thought that was a very valuable experience. I think it still is a valuable experience, but we're not doing it this year, and I think for good reason. And I'll come to that in just a minute. Because this year, as we all know, Graphics Interface is being held on its own, and it's also being held as a virtual conference. So the decision to try a standalone conference this year with just Graphics Interface was a decision that was made a while ago, and it was on purpose. And I think it was for quite a good reason, because we were beginning to see that the way the triple conference was organized really wasn't accomplishing what it had accomplished in the past. And that was because situations have changed. I think the biggest thing is all of these areas have lots of other conferences going on, and there's competition for people's time and actually for the funding that's going to get them to the conference. What we didn't anticipate was COVID-19. So I think there's a special thanks to everyone who's been involved in the organization of this conference for being able to move very quickly to a completely different way of presenting the conference and having the virtual component. And I think the decision to put the other presentations online so they'd be available for people to look at their leisure and also to go back and look at them again, I think is a very good decision. We may find that that points us to the future direction for at least some aspects of the conference. We'll see. But I wanted to come back to something that was said earlier, which is what's characterized the conference for essentially 50 years is high quality papers, presentations, top-notch reviewing. And as a reviewer and someone who's talked to other people in the community, one thing I've heard more than once from people who are first-timers at Graphics Interface in terms of their paper submissions is they're quite surprised at the high quality of reviewing, which is better than many other conferences and certainly comparable, I think, with the top conferences. So we should be very proud of that, and that's certainly something that as we move into this open review process is another way to improve that. Another thing we have is archival proceedings. They're available on the web. They're also indexed in the ACMDL, and that was a change that came at a particular point that various volunteers helped make. And then finally, of course, it's a great opportunity for all of us to get together every year. And that's the one thing that we're not really going to see this year, or at least we're not going to see the face-to-face version of it. So I hope that people participate in the town hall tomorrow at, I guess it's 4 o'clock Toronto time, where I'm guessing there'll be quite a discussion about how well what we're doing today and tomorrow work, and what we should be learning from this for the future. Because even if things get back to the way they used to be, which I think most people are thinking isn't really going to happen completely, maybe there's some lessons we can learn about how to run things in the future and how to really maintain the high quality that's been associated and the great social experience that we get through Graphics Interface. So just in closing, I'd like to again say that there's been a lot of volunteers over the years, and I'm very thankful that people that came well before I got involved had really established a strong base on which to build. And I've been very impressed by all the people I've seen come and go over the years who've made many contributions. So I want to thank people again for selecting me for this award. Means a lot. I put a lot of time into the organization, but lots of other people have too. I don't think I'm by any ways unique. I would also like to just say one thing, because one of our co-chairs gave a part of the introduction in French, which I think is great. There is a history to this conference that's been a little bit lost, which was in the early days, it was more bilingual. Some papers were in French, some were in English, presentations were mixed. We tend to have moved, as have many conferences, to a more English style. I think there's an opportunity when we're putting up videos in future to consider, for example, dual language videos where perhaps there's not a completely different version for French and English. But I think that that's one of the things that's unique about Canada. And I think that there's many aspects of graphics interface that really build strongly on the unique Canadian approach to things. And certainly bilingual is one of them. So look forward to what might happen on that. Thank you again. If there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Maybe it's time for people to have a bio break, though. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Kelly. I think we do have a few minutes for questions, and then we'll take a small break before our first keynote. If you do have a question for Kelly, post it with text on the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand in the attendees, or in the participants tab. I think Brian Weibel has a question here. Brian, go ahead. I think I've unmuted you.
I see that Paul has said someone should ask me a question in French. I have Francophone daughters, but I don't speak French.
No chance of me asking you a question in French, Kelly. So one of the things that's really interesting about graphics interface is the fact that it combines HCI and graphics, which split many years ago in every other way, certainly with the Chi and SIGGRAPH conferences and so on going their own separate ways. I wondered if you could comment on what lessons we've learned by keeping them together and whether this is a good thing for the future.
I definitely think it's a good thing. I mean, for a couple of reasons. I mean, from a very practical one, both communities within Canada are somewhat smaller. I mean, they're not the full international community. So I think there actually is an economy of scale there. And that's also one of the reasons I thought the triple conference, AIGI CRB, was helpful, because it actually gave critical mass for running a face-to-face conference. I mean, this gets into the weeds of conference organization, which some of us have spent more time than we want. But mounting a banquet, there's kind of a particular size, and it turns out to be just about the size of what the triple conference was. Too fewer people, you can't really do it right. Too many more, you can't accommodate. So coming back more to the technical aspects, as you said, when SIGGRAPH started up, and still the name of the SIGGRAPH conference, it's about computer graphics and interactive techniques. SIGGRAPH sort of wobbles back and forth on how much HCI they have, and that's one of the reasons the Chi organization came into being. But I think that for me, and this is partly the area I always worked in, interactive computer graphics clearly crosses the two. And then when you bring in fields like visualization that used to be largely on the graphics side, and then when people looked at sort of perceptual aspects, there was a Chi side to it, but now it's a whole field in itself. And we don't include that in the formal sort of name of the conference, but I always refer to, and many people do, that it's computer graphics, visualization, and HCI, and it's all the cross connections between them. Widening up a little bit, just to finish one more time, there's a lot of AI techniques. So we saw, in fact, that one of our dissertation award winners was using machine learning. And there's definitely a lot of robotics involved. We saw some of that in many papers. And there's also a lot of vision. And in fact, computer graphics is almost sort of intertwining itself in many ways with vision because of the sensing aspects of things. So even if the ultimate product is an image or sound, as we also saw today, there's a lot of techniques that are necessary to get the raw data in, and that comes from the vision community. So to me, it's really a question of how big you can make it before the combination of the fields before it gets unwieldy. And I think that's kind of what we sort of saw with the triple conference. We were getting just a little too large. But to me, it's very clear that the graphics and HCI work really well together. And I think that's been a great strength within Canada. Certainly you see some researchers that cross back and forth, and there's others who are very firmly in one camp or the other. That was a long answer.
Great answer. I don't know if it's visible to everyone who's here, but there's been over 80 participants so far during our opening talks here. So I think we are achieving that of bringing the community together despite being virtual. Kelly, I wanted to ask one question. I know as someone early on in their career myself, that it's really easy to be sort of laser focused on like doing research and putting out papers, and it sometimes feels a little bit harder to stay motivated to do the service aspects in our community. What did you personally find as your motivation and reward for service?
That's a good question. Part of it is, I don't want to say generational. I think it's just the time I came along. By the time I got my PhD and became a faculty member, I actually took a pay cut to be a faculty member because I wanted to teach. I had been working at a government research lab, but there was never time in my career, most of my career at least, where I didn't think that if being an academic didn't work out, I could go to industry and perhaps work a little less and get paid more. And that's a great freeing thing, because it means that you can take on some of these, I'll say service, but the roles that don't show up in the high impact place in your CV. So anybody still trying to get tenure, it's publication. And I was actually pre-tenure when I was local arrangements chair for the conference. But some people like doing those kinds of things, others don't. I think one of our dissertation, the second dissertation today, was talking about combining research and entrepreneurship. I've never had a great desire to start a company. I've maybe been entrepreneurial in a different way, but different people do different things. Some people are very, very focused on research and they're very good at it. I think I was good at research. I think I was better at getting students to be engaged in it. So I just think it's different things strike different people. And traditionally, I think in most fields, the real service contributions, other than serving on program committees, which is how most people start, it comes later when you've got the ability. Maybe you're a full professor, or at least you've got tenure, and you can afford to take some time off and devote energy someplace else. So I think it's very different for different people. But for me, I've really enjoyed working with the people on the various graphics interface and SIGGRAPH and Chi and all the other things that I've been involved in.
Excellent. All right. If we don't have any other questions, then let's thank and congratulate Kelly Booth one more time. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.